great.
Did you know what you were getting into when you made this with the stories and the to bring it to life that way? It's just
Yeah, not at all. So what's interesting is that Ben found out about the repair shop from one of our producers, Jeremy Lambert, and his brother is a luthier, and so he thought this might be interesting to Ben, and Ben was excited about the idea of like the North Pole of musical instruments, and this idea that now over 100,000 instruments being fixed by it's only 12 people that work there, and Ben went down to kind of test the waters, and they were a little bit hesitant because that article that we received was actually focusing on the budget cuts and how they were understaffed, and therefore the turnaround time for an instrument was almost a year. And since then, it's now like I think 7 or 10 days. But they were still a little bit reserved, and so Ben went down there and gave this like rousing speech, and to convince them. And at the end, gave like a Jerry Maguire "Who's with me" kind of thing, and 4 people said yes, and it's the 4 people in the film. And that's it. There was no like pre-interview. There was no trying to see who had the best story. It was just those 4 people that volunteered. And then on top of that, we didn't do any sort of pre-interview either. And so I think one of the things that Ben talks about a lot that I really appreciate is that if you pre-interview someone, if they talk about some of these memories that they maybe haven't talked about in a while, when you go to do the actual filmed interview, they'll talk about it in a way where you've already heard it. So they don't have that same sense of like freshness when it comes to reflecting on those things. So all of these stories we found out in the actual interviews. We didn't know anything about Elvis or
oh my God,
anything like that. Yeah.
Incredible. So and you learned about this from Ben, but as we talked about earlier briefly, so you're a product of those schools. I think I told you I went to Hollywood High, so there was like a special kind of recognition in that. I remember those instruments, and it's just a phenomenal thing to understand. Your mind must have been fairly blown when you realized what was going on.
Yeah, just like the generation, right? Like it started in 1959, so it's like 65 years of musicians that have gone through there that have benefited from those instruments, and the fact that John Williams was LAUSD all the way down to preacher Kenneth Lamar was LAUSD. Like for there to be that wide range of musical artists that have come out of the city that have come from those public school programs is pretty amazing.
All right, we're going to get to what you hope for, how this will come out of it. But can we talk about the kids for a minute, because that is what it's all about. And I think again, no pre-interviews, right? A little bit, nothing.
With them, we did it slightly. We just kind of talked to them over Zoom for about 20 minutes each, just to kind of get a sense. Yeah, but we immediately fell in love with all of them. I mean, Portia, as soon as we saw her, she's the violinist at the beginning and at the end, and we knew she was going to be a star.
Yes.
But yeah, we just did like.
Was she excited?
Oh yeah, especially now. Like we have been able to do a lot of this campaigning and all that stuff with them, and Portia has been a featured aspect of that, and she's on the poster, and literally today Ben was texting us that we put these huge posters up on Roosevelt High School that you can see from the 101 freeway. It's like bigger than the Netflix poster that's right next to it, and it's Portia's face on it. It's pretty awesome.
Oh, so beautiful. Okay, now let's talk about this, because obviously there are many revelations in this. First of all, the repair shop itself, and how that kind of is such an extraordinary notion. And it's brought to life, I'd say, also musically speaking. What Katja Richardson and you did with that, it is like an adventure. Kind of the sound of this movie brings it to a sense of wonder. But it is wondrous. It's nutty, actually. It's incredible that this is how it actually happens. And we recognize in that is not how it happens elsewhere. Talk a little bit about that, what you're thinking about.
Yeah, I think we were really surprised and both disappointed and also prideful about being from LA that it's the last of its kind. The fact that these major cities, and even here in New York, and other incredible music-driven cities, have all privatized this aspect of their public school programs. And so for us to have something like this in LA to be very proud of, I think was very exciting, but also the fact that these craftspeople never meet the students that they do this for. They have done this for decades, literally in this windowless warehouse, and have a genuine joy and passion of what they do. I think that was so inspiring from the first time we went down there, the fact that like each of them does this with so much love and so much care and dedication, and that can really be felt in that space. And so, yeah, it really feels like we stumbled upon something very special.
Yeah, so it's fulfilling the need, because it's also the fact that LA is providing all of these instruments in itself is a remarkable thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like I was talking to actually my college roommate here that played guitar. He was saying that when he was younger, his mom couldn't afford therapy, and so she bought him a guitar. Like that was the trade-off. And it was like a $99 4th of July sale at Guitar Center. And he was saying that he took such good care of it because if it broke, they wouldn't be able to replace it or repair it. And so the fact that this program was able to provide those instruments for free, the repairs for free, I feel like it's something that a lot of young people definitely rely on, and it's something that brings a lot of them into school when they don't really want to be at school, and some of the other things.
Well, yeah, the saxophone player talked a lot about, how it got her motivated to actually succeed at all of it, to show up in every possible way. And we know that about passion-driven learning, like something that you look forward to, and then the discipline of it, and then the reward. I'm interested, you mentioned that the repair people had no contact, and I loved the story where Patty says she feels like she has this kind of secret communication through. But then at the end of the film, you have this kind of joyous kind of union of everything. What was that like when they actually were put in that circumstance?
Yes, it was pretty magical. So Ben and I talked about doing something like that throughout the process of making the film. We worked on the film for over 4 years, and we submitted and got into the Telluride Film Festival with just a normal credits scroll. And once we got in, we kind of looked at each other and we're like, we kind of have to try this idea of getting this multi-generational orchestra of alumni that were all impacted by this repair shop, and put it together in like a couple of weeks. Peter Rotter, who's a music contractor in LA, and is also a mentor of both Ben and I, and actually who introduced Ben and I, and also produced on the film, he helped us get together that whole orchestra, and Ben and I worked on the piece. I wrote the piece in like a weekend, and Ben and I talked about how to storyboard what we wanted to film as I was writing the piece, which was a lot of fun, where we knew that we wanted to have this long pull-out on Porsche, so that there would be a certain amount of time, and then a lot of call and response, and having solos for each of the repair people. So all those different things were a lot of fun to kind of visualize and then sketch out in the actual composition. But then we had about 3 hours to record it at Warner Brothers, and it came together the way it did. But it was definitely very anxiety-inducing, to say the least. But I also think it's like, as you know, just like amazing musicians can not only play what's on the page, but just pour this emotion and this life into it, which was amazing to see. And then on the day, the other thing that was so special is that, first of all, it was kind of like a family reunion where people that, hadn't seen each other in a while were seeing each other. People that didn't know they went to the same school 15 years apart were finding that out for the first time. Even for me, there were people that played on other scores of mine I didn't know were from LA, so talking to them about their experience in LA. But there was so much love in that room that while we were recording, musicians would come into the control room one after another and say, like, by the way, I'm donating my time. Like, this is free for me. And they all felt so appreciative of this repair shop as well. So it was definitely like a pretty emotionally overwhelming day.
It's full of that sense of joy. But just stay there for a minute, because anybody who's watched Kris, and some students are here were at your film composition seminar where we saw your computer work. You're not fooling around as a film composer. It's so meticulous that you actually suddenly were somewhere else. As a film composer, you're involved in so many amazing projects, but as a film director is another thing. How did we end up there? And I want to give a shout out, if you love this, you've got to see Concerto as a Conversation, which is
before I left New York, I started working on this documentary about Kobe Bryant, and it was like one of the first documentaries I worked on that led to me really pursuing film composing. I always wanted to do it, but that was one that really kind of got the ball rolling. But Kobe was very fascinated with filmmaking, and so while we were making the film, as a matter of fact, like when I joined the film, the producer who brought me on was like, "Oh, we just have we have to screen it for Kobe. We have like a pretty good final cut. We're gonna screen it for Kobe, and then you can start working." And they showed it to Kobe, and Kobe was like, "No, this is not gonna work," and made them start from scratch. And I was still brought on as a composer at that point. And so they worked on it for another year while I was working on the score. And at the same time, Kobe was kind of becoming a film student, where like he would sit down with the editor for an hour and talk about Darren Aronofsky and like all these different editing styles for each of those films and all this stuff. And so I was kind of like a fly on the wall as he was getting this filmmaking education. And for me, it was a light bulb moment where I realized that music has always been a narrative tool for me. It's always been this way of expressing some sort of idea or story or emotion. And seeing him be this dedicated to transitioning from basketball to filmmaking, I was like, well, maybe I can try something like that. So I wrote this little short film and talked to some mentors of mine. They're like, you should go try to make it. And I talked to Peter Rotter, and he was like, well, you have to meet Ben Profit. And so Ben sat down with me, and I just grilled him on every question I could possibly think of the filmmaking process, and he was generous enough to give me camera equipment, and we did all the editing at his studio at Breakwater. He basically was like a producer on this self-funded student film that will always stay on my hard drive and never see the light of day. But he was so integral to that process, and he was very inspired by how much I wanted to explore this idea of music driving the filmmaking process. And so that led to Concerto, and then while we're working on Concerto, that led to this.
Wow. And I should say that Ben was meant to be here, but he's off because this is an Oscar-nominated short doc, and he is in London right now promoting that. And, you know, how does that feel? This is the second time, because Concerto was nominated as well, right?
Yeah, I think for both of these, it feels so special because Ben and I are really just representatives of the people that were honest and vulnerable enough to share their stories with us. You know, even with Concerto, it was really my grandfather. You know, it was like his story, and so I'll never forget when we got nominated, calling him, and him at the time, 91 years old, saying like, I don't know what I did to deserve this. And I feel even emotional thinking about how much he did and how much he felt surprised by this sort of public recognition. And it's the exact same thing with these technicians where they didn't have to share these stories with us. They didn't have to like go as deep as they did, and they really trusted us with that. And so the fact that not only people are responding to their stories in that way, but the fact that the city is really championing them. And you know, we went to a school board meeting where they talked about never letting this repair shop go away, and we went to City Hall to a meeting and council people talking to them about, you know, always keeping the repair shop, and gave each of the repair technicians, even the ones that weren't in the film, certificates from the city. And so I think for them, the fact that, again, they've done this for decades without any sort of consideration as to, you know, will somebody know that they did this? And Dana just retired, and, you know, he was planning on retiring and going sailing and not really needing any sort of applause for what he's done. And the fact that this recognition and the Oscar nomination and all this stuff has come as like a bonus to what they were looking for is really special.
Well, I think it's an incredible story for Los Angeles, but it's an incredible story for every city, every town, certainly in America. But if we think about it, this is a global cast. These are people who have come to this country, and they are telling stories that are deeply meaningful, and they're deeply related to education, to music in particular. I know you have some big plans to try to make that more. You want to talk about those now, or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're about to launch a big capital campaign this week. We're going to actually do an event at Hollywood High.
You're going to Hollywood?
Yeah.
Excellent. Come in the Sheiks.
Yeah, they've been really great. So we're going to do like this marching band thing and all this stuff, but we're launching a capital campaign to aim to raise $15 million And what that'll do is not only subsidize the music program, but it would, keep this repair shop in place. It also would create an apprenticeship program for young people to get into the repair work and add a few more staff members. And so, we're really trying to do whatever we can beyond the Oscar season to continue to champion this, not only in LA, but elsewhere as well. Like, there are a couple of cities, I think Las Vegas and another city, that have actually, since the film came out, reached out to Steve, the piano technician and supervisor, about trying to figure out how they could bring theirs back as well. So we really hope that we can have other cities bring their programs back.